Marcus Williams pushed his cleaning cart down the empty hallway on the 32nd floor of Brennan Industries. The wheels squeaked softly as he moved from office to office. It was almost midnight, and the building was quiet except for the hum of air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic below. Marcus had been working the night shift as a janitor for 3 years now. He knew every corner of this building, every stain on the carpet, and every executive who stayed late. At 45 years old, he was tired most of the time, but he never complained. This job paid for his small apartment and helped cover his 12-year-old daughter Emma's medical bills. Emma had been sick for months. The doctor said she needed an expensive surgery that their insurance would not fully cover. Marcus worked extra hours whenever he could, but the money was never enough. Every night he worried about how he would pay for Emma's treatment. Tonight felt different somehow. Marcus noticed that more lights were on than usual in the executive offices. As he cleaned the conference room, he could hear voices coming from the corner office where David Brennan worked. David was the younger brother of Victoria Brennan, the company's CEO. Marcus tried not to listen to private conversations. It was not his business what the executives talked about, but as he emptied the trash cans near David's office, the voices became clearer. David was on the phone with someone, and he sounded angry. "No, you don't understand," David said in a harsh whisper. "Victoria has to go. She's been running this company into the ground and the board doesn't see it. We need to make them see it." Marcus froze. He should walk away. He should mind his own business. But something about David's tone made him stay and listen. "The quarterly reports come out next week," David continued. "If we adjust a few numbers here and there, make it look like she's been stealing money, the board will have no choice but to remove her. I've been planning this for months." Marcus felt his stomach drop. He knew Victoria Brennan. She was one of the few executives who actually spoke to the cleaning staff. She always said good evening when she saw him working late. She even knew his name, which was more than most people in the building could say. "Reynolds, you need to make sure the security cameras don't record anything suspicious in my office," David said. "And remember, this has to look like Victoria's doing. The fake signatures you made are perfect. No one will ever know they're not real." Marcus's hands began to shake. He was hearing about a crime. David Brennan was planning to frame his own sister for stealing money from the company. Marcus knew he should call the police, but who would believe a janitor over the brother of the CEO? "Make sure you plant the evidence in Victoria's office safe," David continued. "The combination is her daughter's birthday. She's so predictable. Once the board sees those documents tomorrow night, she'll be finished. I'll finally get what should have been mine from the beginning." Marcus slowly backed away from the office. His heart was pounding so hard he thought David might hear it. He pushed his cart to the supply closet at the end of the hall and tried to calm down. His mind was racing with questions and fears. What should he do with this information? If he told Victoria, would she believe him? If he went to the police, would they take his word seriously? And if David found out that Marcus had overheard the conversation, what would happen to him and Emma? Marcus thought about his daughter lying in her hospital bed last week. The doctors had said her condition was getting worse. She needed that surgery soon, or she might not get better. If Marcus lost his job for getting involved in executive business, he would lose his health insurance too. Emma would have no chance at all. But as Marcus cleaned the rest of the floor that night, he kept thinking about Victoria Brennan. She had built this company from almost nothing after her father died 10 years ago. She had worked 16-hour days and made tough decisions that saved thousands of jobs. She did not deserve to be destroyed by her own brother's lies. Around 1 a.m, Marcus saw a light still on in Victoria's office. This was not unusual. Victoria often worked very late, especially when big announcements were coming up. Marcus knew that the quarterly board meeting was scheduled for tomorrow evening. That must be why David was in such a hurry to set his trap. Marcus finished cleaning the bathrooms and organizing his supplies. He had made a decision. He could not let David destroy Victoria with lies. It was not right. Even if it meant risking his job and Emma's future, he had to warn Victoria about what her brother was planning. Marcus walked slowly toward Victoria's office. Through the glass walls, he could see her sitting at her desk, reading through a stack of papers. Her long brown hair was pulled back in a ponytail and she looked tired. She was probably preparing for tomorrow's board meeting, not knowing that her brother was planning to ambush her. Marcus knocked gently on the door frame. Victoria looked up and smiled when she saw him. "Hello, Marcus," she said. "Working late again, I see." "Yes, ma'am," Marcus replied. His voice sounded shaky and he cleared his throat. "Ms. Brennan, I need to tell you something important, something I overheard tonight." Victoria set down her papers and looked at him with concern. "Of course. Please, come in and close the door." Marcus stepped into the office and closed the door behind him. His palms were sweaty, and his heart was still racing. He had never been alone in an executive's office before, and he felt out of place among the expensive furniture and awards on the walls. "What's wrong, Marcus?" Victoria asked. "You look upset." Marcus took a deep breath. There was no going back now. "Ms. Brennan, your brother is setting a trap for you. He's planning to make it look like you stole money from the company. The board meeting tomorrow night, it's all part of his plan." Victoria's face went pale. She stared at Marcus for a long moment, and he wondered if she thought he was lying, or maybe losing his mind. "Tell me exactly what you heard," she said quietly. Marcus sat in the chair across from Victoria's desk, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. He had never felt so nervous in his life. Victoria listened carefully as he repeated every word he had heard from David's phone conversation. Her face grew more serious with each detail. "He said something about fake signatures," Marcus continued, "and a man named Reynolds who's helping him. They're going to put fake documents in your office safe. David knows the combination is your daughter's birthday." Victoria's eyes widened. "How could he possibly know that?" "I don't know, ma'am," Marcus said, "but that's what he said. He sounded very sure about it." Victoria stood up and walked to the window that looked out over the city. The streets below were mostly empty except for a few late-night delivery trucks and taxicabs. She was quiet for a long time, and Marcus wondered if she was angry at him for bringing her this news. "Marcus," she finally said, turning back to face him, "do you understand what you're telling me? You're saying that my own brother is trying to destroy me." "I know it sounds crazy," Marcus replied. "Marcus, but I heard what I heard. He wants to take over the company. He said you were running it into the ground and that he should have gotten it in the first place." Victoria sat back down and rubbed her forehead. She looked like she had a terrible headache. "David has always been jealous that our father left the company to me, but I never thought he would go this far." "What are you going to do?" Marcus asked. "I don't know yet," Victoria said. "If what you're telling me is true, then David has been planning this for months. He must have been very careful to cover his tracks. It won't be easy to prove what he's doing." Marcus shifted in his chair. "Ms. Brennan, I have to ask you something. If you investigate this and David finds out that I told you, what will happen to me?" Victoria looked at him with understanding. "You're worried about your job." "It's not just my job," Marcus said. "My daughter Emma is sick. She needs surgery, and I can't afford to lose my health insurance. If David finds out I was listening to his private conversation, he could have me fired. Or worse." "Tell me about Emma," Victoria said gently. Marcus's voice became softer when he talked about his daughter. "She's 12 years old. She's been having problems with her heart since she was born. The doctors say she needs an operation to fix it, but it costs more money than I make in 2 years. I've been working extra shifts and saving every penny, but it's not enough." Victoria listened carefully. She could see the worry in Marcus's eyes and the way his shoulders sagged when he talked about the medical bills. "Marcus," she said, "I want you to know that I believe what you're telling me. The details you heard, about the quarterly reports, about Reynolds, about my safe combination, those are things that only someone very close to the company would know. David must trust this Reynolds person completely to share such specific information." "So what do we do?" Marcus asked. "We have to be very smart about this," Victoria said. "If David is planning to spring this trap at tomorrow night's board meeting, then we don't have much time. But we also can't let him know that we're on to him." Victoria walked over to her safe, which was hidden behind a painting on the wall. She entered the combination and opened it. Inside, Marcus could see stacks of important papers and files. "Everything looks normal now," she said. "But if David is planning to plant fake documents in here, he'll probably do it tomorrow during the day when I'm in meetings." "What if we set up a camera?" Marcus suggested. "We could catch him putting the fake papers in your safe." Victoria shook her head. David mentioned that Reynolds would make sure the security cameras don't record anything suspicious. "Reynolds must work in our security department or at least have access to the camera system." Marcus felt discouraged. "So how can we stop them?" "We need evidence of our own," Victoria said. "Marcus, I know this is a lot to ask, but would you be willing to help me? You have access to the building at night when most people aren't here. You could look for evidence that David and Reynolds are planning this setup." Marcus thought about Emma lying in her hospital bed. He thought about the surgery she needed and the bills that kept piling up. He thought about how hard it would be to find another job if he got fired from this one. But he also thought about Victoria, who had always treated him with respect and kindness. She didn't deserve to be destroyed by lies and fake documents. "I'll help you," Marcus said. "But I need to know that Emma will be safe. If something happens to me, she has no one else." "I understand," Victoria said. "I promise you that if you help me, I'll make sure Emma gets the medical care she needs no matter what happens." Marcus felt a weight lift from his shoulders. For the first time in months, he had hoped that Emma might get her surgery. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. Victoria thought for a moment. "Tomorrow night, act like everything is normal. Clean the offices like you always do, but pay special attention to David's office and anywhere else you might overhear conversations. If you find any documents or evidence, take pictures with your phone." "I don't have a very good phone," Marcus said. "It's old and the camera doesn't work very well." "That's okay," Victoria said. "Even blurry pictures might help. The important thing is to document whatever you find." "What about Reynolds?" Marcus asked. "If he works in security, he might be watching the cameras even if they're not recording." "Good point," Victoria said. "We need to be very careful. Reynolds probably knows the building as well as you do, maybe better." They spent the next hour going over the plan. Victoria would act normal during the day, going to her meetings and preparing for the board meeting as if she suspected nothing. Marcus would continue his regular cleaning routine but would look for any signs of David and Reynolds preparing their trap. "One more thing," Victoria said as Marcus prepared to leave. "Don't tell anyone else about this. Not your neighbors, not your friends, not even Emma. The fewer people who know, the safer we'll all be." Marcus nodded. "I understand." As he walked toward the door, Victoria called his name. "Marcus, thank you for telling me about this. I know it wasn't easy for you to get involved." "You've always been kind to me," Marcus said. "It's the right thing to do." After Marcus left, Victoria sat alone in her office for a long time. She looked at family photos on her desk, including one of her and David from when they were children. They had been close once before their father died and left the company to her instead of David. She had always known that David resented her for inheriting Brennan Industries. But she never imagined he would try to destroy her with lies and forged documents. The thought that her own brother could hate her so much made her feel sick. Victoria locked the photos in her desk drawer. Tomorrow would be one of the most important days of her life. Either she would expose David's plot and save her company, or she would lose everything she had worked for. But at least she wouldn't face it alone. A night janitor with a sick daughter had chosen to risk everything to help her. If Marcus could be that brave, then she could be brave too. The next evening, Marcus arrived at work with his heart already pounding. He had barely slept during the day, thinking about what Victoria had asked him to do. As he changed into his work uniform in the basement locker room, he checked his phone to make sure the camera was working. The pictures were blurry, but they were better than nothing. Marcus started his cleaning routine on the lower floors, working his way up to the executive level. He wanted everything to seem normal in case anyone was watching. But as he cleaned each office, his mind kept racing with worry about what he might find. When he reached the 28th floor, Marcus noticed that several executives were working late. This was unusual for a Thursday night. He could hear voices from the conference rooms and saw lights on in offices that were normally dark by this time. As Marcus cleaned the hallway, he overheard two executives talking about tomorrow's board meeting. They sounded nervous and excited, like something big was going to happen. Marcus realized that David must have told some of the board members to expect shocking news about Victoria. Marcus took the elevator to the 32nd floor, where the top executives had their offices. The hallway was quieter here, but he could see that David's office light was still on. Marcus pushed his cleaning cart slowly down the hall, trying to look casual while listening for any conversations. David's office door was closed, but Marcus could hear voices inside. One voice belonged to David, and the other was a man Marcus had never heard before. This must be Reynolds, the security consultant David had mentioned on the phone. Marcus pretended to clean the water fountain near David's office while he listened to their conversation. "Everything is ready for tomorrow night," Reynolds said. "The documents are perfect. Even a handwriting expert wouldn't be able to tell they're fake." "And you're sure no one will be able to trace this back to us?" David asked. "Absolutely," Reynolds replied. "The offshore bank accounts are set up under Victoria's name. The fake signatures match her real ones perfectly. When the board sees these papers tomorrow night, they'll have no choice but to remove her as CEO." Marcus felt his hands shaking as he heard them talking about destroying Victoria's life. He moved his cart closer to the door, hoping to hear more details. "What about the janitor who works this floor?" Reynolds asked. "He seems to be around a lot at night. Should we be worried?" "About him?" Marcus froze. They were talking about him. "Marcus? No, he's harmless," David said with a laugh. "He's just some guy who needs the job to pay his kids' medical bills. He keeps his head down and minds his own business. Besides, even if he did overhear something, who would believe a janitor over us?" Marcus felt anger burning in his chest. David thought he was too unimportant to matter. David had no idea that Marcus had already warned Victoria about the trap. "Still," Reynolds said, "we should be careful. I've been watching the security cameras and I noticed he's been on this floor later than usual the past few nights." "Don't worry about it," David said. "After tomorrow night I'll be running this company, and people like Marcus will know their place." Marcus heard footsteps moving toward the door. He quickly pushed his cart away and started emptying trash cans in the nearby offices. A moment later, David's door opened and Reynolds walked out. Marcus got his first look at the man who was helping David destroy Victoria. Reynolds was tall and thin with gray hair and cold blue eyes. He wore an expensive suit and carried a briefcase. He looked like the kind of man who could convince people to trust him, even while he was lying to them. Reynolds walked toward the elevator without looking at Marcus. But just before the elevator doors closed, Marcus saw Reynolds staring at him with a suspicious expression. Marcus waited until he was sure Reynolds had left the building. Then he pushed his cart back toward David's office. The light was still on and he could hear David talking on the phone again. Marcus knocked on the doorframe. "Excuse me, Mr. Brennan. I need to empty your trash." David looked up from his desk with annoyance. "Can't it wait? I'm busy." "I'm sorry, sir," Marcus said, "but I have to finish this floor before midnight or I'll get in trouble with my supervisor." David waved his hand impatiently. "Fine. Just be quick about it." Marcus entered the office and walked over to the trash can beside David's desk. As he emptied it, he looked around the office carefully. On David's desk, he could see several folders marked confidential and a stack of papers with what looked like Victoria's signature at the bottom. David was focused on his phone call and wasn't paying attention to Marcus. This was Marcus's chance to get evidence. He pulled out his phone and quickly took pictures of the documents on the desk. The camera made a small clicking sound, but David didn't seem to notice. Marcus finished emptying the trash and started to leave the office. But as he reached the door, he noticed something that made him stop. On a small table near the window, there was an open briefcase filled with more documents. Marcus could see bank statements, legal papers, and what looked like copies of Victoria's signature on different sheets of paper. Marcus looked back at David, who was still talking on the phone. Moving as quietly as possible, Marcus walked over to the briefcase and took several pictures of the documents inside. One of the papers was a letter that said, "Offshore Account, V. Brennan," at the top. Another was a bank statement showing large amounts of money being transferred out of the company's accounts. Marcus was so focused on taking pictures that he didn't hear David's phone call end. Suddenly, David's voice was right behind him. "What are you doing?" Marcus spun around, his heart hammering in his chest. David was standing just a few feet away, staring at the phone in Marcus's hand. "I was just... The trash can over here was full too," Marcus stammered, pointing to a small wastebasket near the briefcase. David's eyes narrowed. "You were taking pictures of my private documents." "No, sir," Marcus said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I was just checking the time, on my phone." David stepped closer. "Show me your phone." Marcus knew he was caught. The pictures of the fake documents were clearly visible on his phone screen. There was no way to explain them away. "Give me that phone right now," David demanded. Instead of handing over the phone, Marcus quickly pressed the send button. He had already typed Victoria's email address into a message with the photos attached. Even if David took his phone now, Victoria would still get the evidence. "What did you just do?" David shouted. Marcus didn't answer. He pushed past David and ran toward the door. Behind him, he could hear David grabbing his own phone and calling someone. "Reynolds, we have a problem," David was saying as Marcus ran down the hallway. "The janitor was taking pictures of everything. He knows about our plan." Marcus reached the elevator and pressed the button frantically, but the elevator was too slow. He could hear David's office door slam and footsteps running toward him. Marcus ran to the stairwell and started taking the stairs two at a time. His cleaning cart was still upstairs, but he couldn't go back for it now. All that mattered was getting out of the building before David and Reynolds caught him. As Marcus ran down the stairs, he could hear David shouting into his phone. "Find him! Don't let him leave the building! If those pictures get out, we're finished!" Marcus reached the ground floor and ran toward the parking garage. His old car was parked in the far corner, away from the security cameras. But as he ran across the garage, he heard the stairwell door open behind him. Reynolds appeared in the doorway, moving faster than Marcus had expected for a man his age. Reynolds wasn't running, but he was walking quickly and purposefully, like a hunter tracking prey. Marcus reached his car and fumbled with his keys. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely get the key into the lock. Behind him, he could hear Reynolds' footsteps getting closer. Finally, Marcus got the car door open and jumped inside. He started the engine and backed out of the parking space quickly. In his rearview mirror, he could see Reynolds standing in the middle of the garage talking on his phone. As Marcus drove toward the exit, he realized that his life had just changed forever. He was no longer just a janitor trying to help his boss. Now he was a man with dangerous evidence, being hunted by people who would do anything to stop him. But at least Victoria would get the pictures. That was all that mattered now. Marcus drove through the empty streets with his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. Every few seconds, he checked his rearview mirror to see if anyone was following him. The city looked different at night when you were running for your life. Every shadow seemed dangerous, and every car behind him could be an enemy. His phone buzzed with a text message. Marcus pulled over under a streetlight to read it. The message was from Victoria. "Got your photos? Evidence is clear. Stay safe. We'll handle this." Marcus felt a small moment of relief. At least Victoria had the proof she needed to stop David's plan. But his relief quickly turned to fear when he remembered Reynolds' cold blue eyes and the way David had shouted orders to find him. Marcus started driving again, taking a longer route home through side streets he hoped Reynolds wouldn't know about. He lived in a small apartment building on the other side of town, far from the expensive neighborhoods where people like David and Reynolds lived. As he drove, Marcus thought about Emma. She was staying overnight at the children's hospital for more tests. The doctors wanted to monitor her heart before scheduling the surgery. Marcus was grateful she wasn't at home tonight, but he worried about what would happen if David and Reynolds found out where she was. Marcus parked his car in the back alley behind his apartment building. He used the rear entrance, avoiding the main lobby where anyone could see him come in. His apartment was on the 3rd floor, and he took the stairs instead of the elevator. When Marcus reached his door, something felt wrong. The hallway was darker than usual and he could smell cigarette smoke. Marcus always kept his apartment neat and clean, and he never smoked. Someone had been here. Marcus slowly opened his door and reached for the light switch. When the lights came on, he gasped. His small apartment had been completely destroyed. The couch cushions were torn apart, books were scattered across the floor, and every drawer had been pulled out and emptied. In the kitchen, dishes were broken on the floor, and the refrigerator door was hanging open. Someone had searched through everything he owned, looking for something, probably looking for more evidence about David's plan. Marcus walked carefully through the mess, checking to see what was missing. His old laptop was gone, and so was the small safe where he kept important papers like Emma's birth certificate and medical records. But the worst discovery was in Emma's bedroom. Emma's room had been torn apart just like the rest of the apartment. Her stuffed animals were scattered across the floor, and her clothes had been pulled out of the dresser. On her pillow there was a white envelope with Marcus's name written on it in black ink. Marcus opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a short note written in the same black ink. Mr. Williams, your daughter is safe for now. If you want her to stay that way, you will destroy all evidence of what you saw tonight. You will resign from your job immediately and never speak of this matter to anyone. You have until tomorrow morning to comply. Do not test our patience. The note was not signed, but Marcus knew it was from Reynolds. Somehow they had found out about Emma and where she was staying. Marcus felt panic rising in his chest. His daughter was in danger because of his decision to help Victoria. Marcus grabbed his phone and called the children's hospital. The night nurse answered after several rings. "This is Marcus Williams," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. "I need to check on my daughter Emma. She's a patient in room 314. "Hold on, sir," the nurse said. Marcus could hear her typing on a computer. "I'm sorry, Mr. Williams, but Emma was discharged about an hour ago. Her uncle came to pick her up." Marcus felt like the world was spinning around him. "What uncle? Emma doesn't have an uncle." "The man had proper identification," the nurse said, sounding concerned now. "He said there was a family emergency and that you had sent him to get Emma. He knew her full name and medical history." Marcus hung up the phone and immediately called Victoria's number. She answered on the first ring. "Marcus, thank goodness you're calling," Victoria said. "I've been trying to reach you. The photos you sent are perfect evidence. We can stop David's plan." "They took Emma," Marcus said, his voice breaking. "They have my daughter." There was silence on the other end of the phone. Then Victoria's voice became very serious. "Tell me exactly what happened." Marcus explained about finding his apartment destroyed and the note demanding his silence. He told her about the phone call to the hospital and how someone had taken Emma by pretending to be her uncle. "This is kidnapping," Victoria said. "We need to call the police immediately." "No," Marcus said quickly. "The note said not to involve anyone else. If we call the police, they might hurt Emma." "Marcus, listen to me," Victoria said firmly. "David and Reynolds have crossed a line that they can't come back from. Taking a child is a serious crime. They're desperate now, which makes them dangerous, but it also means they're making mistakes." "What kind of mistakes?" Marcus asked. "Think about it," Victoria said. "They took Emma from the hospital, which means there are security cameras that recorded them. They had to show identification to the nurses. They left a trail that the police can follow." Marcus wanted to believe Victoria, but all he could think about was Emma's scared face. She was just a sick 12-year-old girl who had never hurt anyone. She didn't deserve to be caught in the middle of this corporate war. "There's something else," Victoria said. "I've been doing some research on Reynolds. His full name is Thomas Reynolds, and he's not just a security consultant. He's a former private investigator who was fired from his last job for illegal surveillance. He's been helping David for months, maybe longer." "How did you find that out?" Marcus asked. "I have my own security team," Victoria said. "After you warned me about David's plan, I hired some people to investigate. Reynolds has been watching me for weeks, taking pictures of my meetings and following me home. David has been planning this takeover for a very long time." Marcus felt overwhelmed by all this information. He was just a janitor who wanted to help his daughter get well. He never expected to be fighting against professional criminals. "Victoria, I don't know what to do," Marcus said. "They want me to destroy the evidence and disappear. Maybe I should just do what they ask. Maybe then they'll let Emma go." "Marcus, you can't trust them," Victoria said. "People like David and Reynolds don't keep their promises. Even if you destroy the evidence, they'll still see you as a threat. And they'll know that Emma can identify the man who took her from the hospital." The terrible truth of Victoria's words hit Marcus like a punch to the stomach. David and Reynolds couldn't afford to let Emma go. She had seen Reynolds' face and could describe him to the police. As long as Emma was alive, she was evidence of their crimes. "We have to find her," Marcus said. "Tonight." "Agreed," Victoria said, "but we're going to need help. I'm calling my security team right now. They're professionals who know how to handle situations like this." "How do we even know where to look?" Marcus asked. "They could have taken her anywhere." "Reynolds is smart, but he's also predictable," Victoria said. "He would want to keep Emma somewhere he could control the situation. Somewhere private, but not too far from the city. My security team can track down properties that Reynolds has access to." Marcus heard a car door slam outside his apartment building. He looked out the window and saw a black sedan parked across the street. Someone was sitting in the driver's seat watching his building. "They're watching my apartment," Marcus said. "I can't stay here." "Get out of there right now," Victoria said. "Don't take the elevator and don't go out the front door." "Is there another way out?" Marcus looked around his destroyed apartment one last time. All his possessions were ruined, but possessions didn't matter now. Only Emma mattered. "There's a fire escape in the back," Marcus said. "I can climb down to the alley where my car is parked." "Do it," Victoria said. "But don't go home. Meet me at the office building. We'll use my security team to track down Reynolds and find Emma." Marcus climbed out his bedroom window onto the fire escape. The metal stairs were rusty and creaked as he climbed down to the alley. His car was still there, hidden behind a dumpster. As Marcus drove away from his apartment building, he saw the black sedan's headlights turn on. Someone was following him. But Marcus knew these streets better than any corporate security consultant. He had grown up in this neighborhood and knew every shortcut and back alley. Marcus took 3 quick turns and drove through a narrow passage between 2 buildings that was too small for the sedan to follow. In his rearview mirror, he saw the sedan's brake lights as the driver realized he had lost his target. For the first time that night, Marcus smiled. Reynolds might be a professional, but Marcus was fighting for his daughter's life, and that made him more dangerous than any hired criminal. Marcus drove toward the office building where this whole nightmare had started. Somewhere in the city, Emma was being held prisoner by men who saw her as nothing more than a problem to be solved. But Marcus would find her. And when he did, David and Reynolds would learn what happened when you threatened a father's child. Marcus met Victoria in the parking garage beneath the Brennan Industries building. She was waiting for him with 2 men in dark suits who looked like they could handle serious trouble. Victoria introduced them as Jake and Sam, members of her private security team. "Jake used to work for the FBI," Victoria explained as they gathered around Jake's laptop in the back of a van. "Sam was a police detective for 15 years. They know how to find people who don't want to be found." Jake was typing rapidly on his computer, pulling up information about Reynolds. "Thomas Reynolds owns 3 properties in the city area," he said. "One is his apartment downtown, one is a storage unit, and one is an old warehouse about 30 minutes outside the city." "The warehouse makes the most sense," Sam said, looking at photos of the buildings on the laptop screen. "It's isolated, no neighbors to hear anything, and plenty of space to hide a car." Marcus stared at the photo of the warehouse. It looked like an old factory building with broken windows and weeds growing around it. The thought of Emma being held in such a dark, scary place made him feel sick. "How do we know she's really there?" Marcus asked. "We don't," Jake admitted, "but it's our best guess. Reynolds bought that warehouse 6 months ago, right around the time David would have started planning this takeover." Victoria put her hand on Marcus's shoulder. "We're going to find her, Marcus. I promise you." The team spent 20 minutes planning their approach to the warehouse. Jake would drive around the building to look for guards and cameras. Sam would approach from the back to see if there were any cars parked behind the building. Marcus and Victoria would wait in the van until they knew it was safe. What if there are too many guards? Marcus asked. What if Reynolds has guns? Then we call the real police, Victoria said. But first, let's see what we're dealing with. They drove through the quiet city streets toward the warehouse district. Marcus watched the buildings get older and more run down as they got farther from downtown. This part of the city was mostly empty at night, with just a few homeless people and late-night workers around. When they reached the warehouse, Jake parked the van behind a row of abandoned cars where they couldn't be seen from the building. The warehouse looked even more scary in person than it had in the photos. Most of the windows were boarded up, and the only light came from a single lamp above a side door. I can see one car, Sam said, looking through binoculars. It's a black sedan parked behind the building. That matches the description of the car that was watching Marcus's apartment. Jake pointed to the side of the building. There's a man standing by that door. He's smoking a cigarette, but he's definitely watching the area. He looks like security. Marcus felt his heart pounding. Emma was probably inside that scary building, frightened and alone. He wanted to run straight to the door and demand that they let her go, but he knew that would only make things worse. I'm going to create a distraction, Marcus said suddenly. I'll walk up to the front door like I'm lost or something. While the guard is dealing with me, you can get in through the back. That's too dangerous, Victoria said. Reynolds knows what you look like. If he sees you, he'll know we're here. Good, Marcus said. Let him know I'm here. Maybe he'll focus on me instead of hurting Emma. Jake and Sam looked at each other. They had worked together for years and could communicate without words. Finally, Jake nodded. It could work, Jake said. But you have to promise that if things go bad, you'll run. Don't try to be a hero. Marcus almost laughed. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a scared father who would do anything to save his daughter. Marcus walked slowly toward the front of the warehouse, trying to look confused and harmless. He could see the guard by the side door watching him approach. The guard dropped his cigarette and spoke into a radio. Excuse me, Marcus called out, acting like he was lost. I'm looking for Morrison Street. My GPS stopped working and I think I made a wrong turn. The guard walked toward Marcus, keeping his hand near something under his jacket. Probably a gun, Marcus realized. You need to leave, the guard said. This is private property. Oh, I'm sorry, Marcus said, taking a step closer. I didn't know. I'm just trying to find my way back to the highway. While Marcus was talking to the guard, Jake and Sam were moving around to the back of the building. They found a window that wasn't boarded up and carefully broke the glass to climb inside. Inside the warehouse, it was dark except for some light coming from an office area in the corner. Jake and Sam moved quietly between old machines and boxes, listening for voices or any sign of where Emma might be. They heard Reynolds talking on the phone in the office. The janitor showed up just like you said he would, Reynolds was saying. Don't worry, we'll handle this. Jake pointed toward a door marked storage room near the office. They could see light coming from under the door, and they thought they heard a young girl's voice. Sam carefully opened the storage room door. Inside, they found Emma sitting on a chair, her hands tied with rope. She looked scared, but not hurt. When she saw the two strangers, she started to cry. It's okay, Sam whispered. We're here to help you. Your father sent us. Where is my dad? Emma whispered back. He's outside, Jake said quietly as he cut the ropes around her hands. We're going to take you to him, but we have to be very quiet. Outside, Marcus was still talking to the guard, but he could see that the man was getting suspicious. The guard kept looking at his radio, probably wondering why Reynolds wasn't answering. Look, I really need to find Morrison Street, Marcus said, trying to keep the conversation going. My daughter is sick and I need to get to the hospital. At the mention of a sick daughter, the guard's expression changed. He looked at Marcus more carefully, and his eyes widened with recognition. You're the janitor, the guard said, reaching for his gun. You're Marcus Williams. Before the guard could draw his weapon, Marcus tackled him. They fell to the ground, struggling for control of the gun. Marcus was not a fighter, but desperation made him stronger than he had ever been. Inside the warehouse, Jake and Sam heard the fight outside. They knew their time was running out. Jake picked up Emma and carried her toward the broken window they had used to get in. "What's happening?" Emma asked. "Your dad is making sure we can get you out safely," Sam explained as they climbed through the window. Reynolds came running out of his office when he heard the fight outside. He saw that the storage room was empty and immediately understood what was happening. "They have the girl," Reynolds shouted into his radio. "All units to the back of the building." But Jake and Sam were already at their van with Emma. Jake started the engine while Sam helped Emma into the back seat. Outside, Marcus was still fighting with the guard. The gun had fallen out of reach and both men were exhausted. Marcus heard the van's engine start and knew that Emma was safe. That gave him the strength to push the guard away and run toward the van. "Dad!" Emma cried as Marcus jumped into the van. Jake drove away quickly as Reynolds and two other men came running around the building. But they were too late. Emma was free, and the evidence of their crimes was safe. As they drove back toward the city, Emma told them what had happened. Reynolds had come to the hospital pretending to be her uncle. He had official-looking papers and knew personal information about her and Marcus. "He seemed nice at first," Emma said. "But when we got to the warehouse, he tied me up and said I had to stay there until my dad learned to follow orders." Victoria sat with Emma in the back of the van, making sure she wasn't hurt. "You were very brave," Victoria told her. "Your father was so worried about you." "I knew Dad would come for me," Emma said. "He always keeps his promises." Marcus held his daughter close, feeling relief wash over him. But he also knew that their troubles were not over. David and Reynolds were still free, and they would be angry about losing Emma. The board meeting was only hours away, and David would be more desperate than ever to destroy Victoria. "What happens now?" Marcus asked. "Now we finish what we started," Victoria said. "We have the evidence of David's crimes, we have Emma's testimony about being kidnapped, and we have photos of Reynolds and his men. It's time to end this." Jake was already calling the police to report the kidnapping. Sam was uploading the photos. Marcus had taken to a secure server where David couldn't delete them. As they drove through the early morning streets, Marcus realized that his life would never be the same. He was no longer just a janitor. He was a man who had stood up to powerful people and won. He was a father who had saved his daughter from criminals. But most importantly, he was someone who had done the right thing, even when it was dangerous. The board meeting was in 12 hours. By then, David Brennan would discover that his perfect plan had turned into a nightmare. The sun was rising over the city as Victoria, Marcus, and Emma sat in Victoria's office, planning their next move. Emma was safe, but she was tired and still scared from her night at the warehouse. Victoria had called a doctor to check on Emma, and she was resting on the couch in Victoria's office. "The police have arrested Reynolds and his men," Jake reported, hanging up his phone. "They found drugs and illegal weapons at the warehouse. Reynolds is looking at serious prison time, even without the kidnapping charges." Marcus felt some relief, but he knew the most dangerous person was still free. David would be arriving at the office soon, expecting to destroy Victoria at the board meeting that evening. He had no idea that his plan had fallen apart. "We need to be very careful now," Victoria said. "David doesn't know that we rescued Emma or that Reynolds was arrested. If we play this right, we can let David walk into his own trap." "What do you mean?" Marcus asked. Victoria walked over to her computer and pulled up the fake documents that David was planning to use against her. "David thinks these forged papers will destroy me at the board meeting tonight. But what if we let him present them to the board and then we reveal that they're fake?" Sam nodded approvingly. "You want to let him commit the crime in front of witnesses?" "Exactly," Victoria said. "If David tries to frame me with fake documents in front of the entire board of directors, he'll be confessing to fraud and conspiracy. The board will see what kind of person he really is." Marcus understood the plan, but he was worried about the risks. "What if the board believes the fake documents? What if they remove you as CEO before you can prove they're fake?" "That's where you come in," Victoria said. "The board meeting is at 7 o'clock tonight. You need to be in the building, doing your normal cleaning routine. When David presents his fake evidence, I'll call you as a witness. You can tell the board everything you overheard and show them the photos you took. Marcus looked at Emma, who was sleeping peacefully on the couch. I don't want to leave Emma alone. What if David has other people working for him? Emma will stay here with Jake, Victoria said. My office has the best security in the building. She'll be safer here than anywhere else. Jake checked his watch. David usually arrives at the office around 9 in the morning. We need to make sure everything looks normal when he gets here. Victoria and Marcus spent the next hour planning exactly how the evening would unfold. Marcus would arrive for his shift at his usual time and clean the building normally. Victoria would attend the board meeting as if she suspected nothing about David's plan. The key is to act surprised when David presents his evidence, Victoria explained. If he thinks I know about his plan, he might try something different or dangerous. What if he gets suspicious when he sees that Reynolds isn't answering his phone? Marcus asked. I've thought about that, Victoria said. Jake is going to send David text messages from Reynolds' phone, making it look like everything is going according to plan. At 8:30 in the morning, Marcus kissed Emma goodbye and left for home to get some sleep before his shift. Emma would stay with Victoria and Jake, playing games on Victoria's computer and eating lunch from the executive cafeteria. Marcus drove home carefully, watching for any signs that David's people were following him. His apartment was still a mess from Reynolds' search, but Marcus was too tired to clean it up. He set his alarm for 5 o'clock and tried to sleep. But every time Marcus closed his eyes, he saw Emma's scared face at the warehouse. He thought about how close he had come to losing her forever. David and Reynolds had been willing to hurt an innocent child to protect their plan. That made Marcus more determined than ever to stop them. At 9:15, David arrived at his office looking confident and relaxed. He had no idea that his security consultant was sitting in a jail cell or that his fake documents had been photographed and copied. David checked his phone for messages from Reynolds. Jake had sent a text that said, "Everything ready for tonight. Williams has been handled, no more problems." David smiled when he read the message. He thought Marcus had been scared into silence and that Emma was still being held as insurance. David believed his plan was working perfectly. Throughout the day, Victoria acted normally. She attended meetings, reviewed reports, and prepared for the board meeting as if it were any other quarterly review. Several board members mentioned that they were looking forward to David's presentation about company security. David had told the board members that he had discovered some concerning irregularities in the company's finances. He said he would present his findings at the evening meeting. The board members thought David was being a responsible executive by bringing potential problems to their attention. At 3 o'clock, David called Reynolds' phone to confirm the final details. Jake answered the call, disguising his voice to sound like Reynolds. Everything is set, Jake said. The janitor won't be a problem anymore and all the evidence is in place. Good, David said. After tonight, Victoria will be finished and I'll finally have what should have been mine all along. At 5 o'clock, Marcus arrived at the office building for his shift. He felt strange putting on his janitor's uniform, knowing that this might be his last night doing this job. But he also felt proud of what he had accomplished. He had stood up to powerful people and protected his daughter. As Marcus started his cleaning routine, he thought about how much his life had changed in just 2 days. He had gone from being an invisible night worker to being a key witness in a corporate crime. He had learned that he was braver than he ever imagined. At 6:30, the board members began arriving for the meeting. Marcus recognized most of them from seeing them work late occasionally. They were important business people who made decisions that affected thousands of employees. Marcus hoped these board members would be smart enough to see through David's lies, but he also knew that David was charming and convincing. If the board members wanted to believe David's story, they might ignore evidence that proved he was lying. At 6:45, Marcus received a text message from Victoria. Almost time, stay close to the conference room. When I call you, come. Immediately. Marcus pushed his cleaning cart to the hallway outside the main conference room. Through the glass walls, he could see the board members taking their seats around a large table. Victoria sat at one end of the table, looking calm and professional. David sat at the other end with a folder full of fake documents in front of him. Marcus thought about Emma, who was safe in Victoria's office with Jake, She was probably worried about him, but she would be proud to know that her father was helping to catch the bad guys who had taken her. The board meeting was about to begin. David had no idea that he was walking into a trap of his own making. In a few minutes, he would present his fake evidence to the board, thinking he was destroying Victoria's career. Instead, David would be destroying himself. Marcus checked his phone one more time. Victoria's number was ready to answer as soon as she called. He had practiced what he would say to the board members, going over every detail of what he had overheard and seen. The truth was about to come out. After tonight, everyone would know that David Brennan was a criminal who had tried to steal his sister's company and had kidnapped an innocent child. Marcus took a deep breath and waited for Victoria's call. The board meeting began exactly at 7 o'clock. Marcus watched through the glass walls as Victoria called the meeting to order. The 12 board members looked serious and professional in their expensive suits. They had no idea they were about to witness one of the most dramatic confrontations in corporate history. "Before we begin with the quarterly reports," Victoria said, "my brother David has requested time to present some important information to the board." David stood up, looking confident and somber at the same time. He had practiced this moment for months, and he believed he was about to achieve his greatest victory. "Thank you, Victoria," David said, opening his folder of fake documents. "What I have to share with you tonight is difficult and painful, but as a member of this family and this company, I have a duty to bring it to your attention." Marcus felt his heart beating faster as he watched David begin his presentation. This was it. David was about to commit fraud in front of 12 witnesses. "Over the past several months," David continued, "I have discovered evidence that money has been stolen from our company. Large amounts of money have been transferred to offshore bank accounts without proper authorization." The board members looked shocked. They turned to stare at Victoria, who maintained a calm expression even though she knew what was coming. David walked around the table, handing copies of the forged documents to each board member. These bank statements show transactions totaling over $2 million. The money was transferred to accounts in the Cayman Islands under a false name. "That's a serious accusation, David," said Margaret Chen, the board's senior member. "Do you have proof of who was responsible for these transfers?" David's smile was cold and satisfied. "I'm afraid I do. These documents show that the transfers were authorized using Victoria's personal access codes and digital signature." Marcus watched as the board members examined the fake documents. They looked confused and upset. Some of them were already looking at Victoria with suspicion. "Victoria," said another board member, "what is your response to these allegations?" Victoria stood up slowly, as if she were shocked by David's accusations. Marcus had to admire her acting ability. She looked like someone who had just been blindsided by terrible news. I don't understand," Victoria said, her voice trembling slightly. "I never authorized any transfers to offshore accounts." "David, how did you get these documents?" "I've been working with a security consultant named Thomas Reynolds," David explained. "He discovered irregularities in our financial records and helped me trace them back to their source." David was so focused on his presentation that he didn't notice two men in dark suits entering the conference room. Marcus recognized them as FBI agents. Victoria had called them earlier that day, but David didn't know they were coming. "Where is this Mr. Reynolds now?" Margaret Chen asked. "Shouldn't he be here to present his findings himself?" David looked uncomfortable for the first time. "Reynolds is handling other security matters tonight, but his investigation was thorough and professional." "I find it strange," said another board member, "that such serious financial crimes would be discovered by an outside consultant rather than our own accounting department." Marcus could see that some of the board members were beginning to have doubts about David's story. They were asking the right questions, but David still had convincing fake documents to support his claims. "Ladies and gentlemen," David said, raising his voice to regain control of the room, "I know this is difficult to accept. Victoria is my sister and I love her. But the evidence is clear. She has been stealing from the company that our father built." That was Victoria's cue. She pressed A button on her phone, and Marcus's phone immediately rang. "I'm sorry to interrupt," Victoria said to the board, "but I think we need to hear from someone who has important information about this situation." Marcus took a deep breath and walked into the conference room. All 12 board members turned to look at him. He had never been in a room with so many powerful people before, and he felt nervous. "This is Marcus Williams," Victoria said. "He works the night shift as a janitor in this building. Marcus, please tell the board what you overheard 2 nights ago." Marcus cleared his throat and began to speak. His voice was shaky at first, but it grew stronger as he continued. "2 nights ago, I was cleaning the executive floor when I heard Mr. David Brennan talking on the phone in his office. He was discussing a plan to frame Ms. Victoria Brennan for stealing money from the company." David's face went pale. "That's ridiculous. Why would anyone believe a janitor over a member of the board?" "Because the janitor has proof," Victoria said calmly. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed the board members the photos he had taken of the fake documents in David's office. The pictures clearly showed the forged bank statements and fake signatures. "These photos were taken in David's office," Marcus explained. "I also overheard him talking about planting fake evidence in Victoria's safe." Margaret Chen studied the photos carefully. "These appear to be the same documents that David just presented to us." "That's impossible," David said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Those photos could be fake. Anyone can create false images with computer software." One of the FBI agents stepped forward. "Mr. Brennan, I'm Agent Johnson with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We've been investigating your activities for the past 12 hours. David looked around the room like a trapped animal. For the first time, he realized that his perfect plan had fallen apart completely. "We arrested Thomas Reynolds early this morning," Agent Johnson continued. "He's been very cooperative in explaining your conspiracy to commit fraud and embezzlement." "Reynolds was arrested?" David asked weakly. "Along with kidnapping charges," the second FBI agent added. "Reynolds and his associates abducted Mr. Williams's 12-year-old daughter to prevent him from testifying about your crimes." The board members gasped. They had thought they were dealing with financial fraud, but now they were learning about kidnapping and threats against a child. Margaret Chen stood up, her face red with anger. "David, you kidnapped an innocent child to cover up your crimes?" I didn't know about that," David stammered. "Reynolds was supposed to handle security. I never told him to hurt anyone." "But you did tell him to steal company money and frame your sister," Agent Johnson said. "Reynolds has given us a full confession about your plan to take over the company." Victoria finally spoke, her voice calm but firm. "David, you tried to destroy me with lies and forged documents. When that wasn't enough, you were willing to hurt Marcus's daughter to protect your scheme." The board members were looking at David with disgust and shock. The man they had respected as a capable executive was revealed to be a criminal who would threaten children to get what he wanted. "The board needs to take a vote," Margaret Chen announced. "All in favor of removing David Brennan from his position and supporting a full investigation into his criminal activities?" All 12 board members raised their hands. David's corporate career was over. "David Brennan," Agent Johnson said, pulling out handcuffs, "you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, embezzlement, and accessory to kidnapping." As the FBI agents led David away in handcuffs, he looked back at Victoria with hatred in his eyes. "This should have been mine," he said. "Father should have left the company to me. Father left the company to the child who would protect it and its employees," Victoria replied. "You've proven tonight that you never deserved it." The conference room was quiet after David was taken away. The board members sat in stunned silence, trying to process what they had just witnessed. "Ms. Brennan," Margaret Chen said finally, "the board owes you an apology. We should have questioned David's accusations more carefully." "And we owe Mr. Williams our gratitude," said another board member. "He risked his job and his family's safety to expose the truth." Marcus felt overwhelmed by the attention. He had never expected to be praised by a room full of executives. "I just did what was right," Marcus said simply. "Ms. Brennan has always been fair to the employees. She didn't deserve to be destroyed by lies." Victoria smiled at Marcus with genuine warmth. "Marcus, you've saved my company and my reputation. I can never thank you enough. As the board members filed out of the conference room, talking quietly among themselves about the evening's shocking events, Victoria and Marcus were left alone. Is it really over? Marcus asked. David will go to prison, Victoria said. Reynolds is already talking to the FBI about other crimes they committed. Yes, Marcus, it's really over. Marcus thought about Emma, who was safe in Victoria's office. He thought about the surgery she needed and the medical bills that had been keeping him awake at night. What happens to me now? Marcus asked. I suppose you don't need a janitor who gets involved in executive business, Victoria laughed. The first real laugh Marcus had heard from her in days. Marcus, we need to talk about your future at this company. But first, let's go check on Emma. I think she's been worried about you. 3 months later, Marcus stood in his new office on the 28th floor of Brennan Industries looking out at the city through large windows. The view was amazing, especially compared to the basement supply closet where he used to store his cleaning equipment. The nameplate on his desk read, Marcus Williams, Director of Internal Security. It still felt strange to see his name on expensive brass letters. Sometimes Marcus had to remind himself that this was real, that his life had truly changed so dramatically. Emma was sitting in the chair across from his desk, doing her homework while she waited for him to finish work. Her surgery had been successful, and the doctors said her heart was now as healthy as any other child's. The operation had cost more than Marcus used to make in 3 years, but Victoria had kept her promise. The company's insurance had covered every penny. Dad, I finished my math homework, Emma said, looking up from her notebook. Can we go home now? Marcus smiled at his daughter. She looked so much healthier than she had 3 months ago. Her cheeks had color in them, and she had energy to play with other children. The constant worry about her health was gone from Marcus's life, replaced by the normal concerns of any father with a growing daughter. Just 5 more minutes, Marcus said, signing the last of the security reports on his desk. I want to finish reviewing these background checks. Marcus's job as Director of Internal Security was more interesting than he had expected. He was responsible for making sure that all employees were honest and trustworthy. He investigated reports of theft or fraud, managed the building's security systems, and worked with the police when necessary. Victoria had been right when she said that Marcus's moral compass and attention to detail were exactly what the company needed. In his first 3 months on the job, Marcus had discovered 2 employees who were stealing office supplies and 1 accountant who was taking money from the petty cash fund. He had handled all these situations quietly and professionally, getting the employees the help they needed rather than simply firing them. Mr. Williams? Emma said, using the formal title she always used when they were at the office. Ms. Brennan is here. Marcus looked up to see Victoria standing in his doorway carrying a small wrapped package. I hope I'm not interrupting, Victoria said with a smile. I brought something for Emma. Emma jumped up excitedly. She had grown very fond of Victoria over the past few months. Victoria often invited Emma to have lunch in the executive dining room, and she always remembered Emma's birthday and other important events. What is it? Emma asked, carefully unwrapping the package. Inside was a beautiful leather journal with Emma's name engraved on the cover in gold letters. It's for writing down your thoughts and dreams, Victoria explained. Every successful person needs to keep track of their ideas. Emma hugged the journal to her chest. Thank you, Ms. Brennan. I'm going to write a story about a brave janitor who saves a company from bad guys. Victoria and Marcus both laughed. Emma had become quite a storyteller since her adventure at the warehouse. She had told the story so many times to her friends at school that she was thinking about becoming a writer when she grew up. How was the trial today? Marcus asked. Victoria's expression became more serious. David was sentenced to 8 years, in prison for fraud and conspiracy. Reynolds got 12 years for the fraud and kidnapping charges. Marcus felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. He was glad that justice had been served, but he also felt sorry for Victoria. Despite everything David had done, he was still her brother. Are you okay? Marcus asked. I'm fine, Victoria said. David made his choices and now he has to live with the consequences. I just hope that someday he'll understand that what he did was wrong. The three of them walked to the elevator together. Marcus still felt a little strange riding in the executive elevator instead of taking the service elevator like he used to. But Emma loved pressing the buttons and watching the numbers change as they went down. In the parking garage, Marcus's old car had been replaced by a newer, more reliable vehicle. The company had provided him with a car as part of his benefits package. It wasn't fancy, but it was safe and dependable, which was what mattered most to Marcus. "Dad," Emma said as they drove home, "do you miss being a janitor?" Marcus thought about the question. "I miss some things about it," he said honestly. "It was quiet work and I knew exactly what I was supposed to do every night. My new job is more complicated." "But do you like it better?" Emma asked. "Yes," Marcus said. "I like feeling like I'm making a difference. I like knowing that I'm helping to keep bad people from hurting the company and its employees." Emma nodded seriously. "Like a security guard for the whole building." "Exactly like that," Marcus agreed. When they got home to their new apartment, Marcus looked around at the furniture and decorations that Emma had helped him pick out. Their old apartment had been small and cramped, with noisy neighbors and broken appliances. This new place was in a better neighborhood with a good school for Emma and a park where she could play safely. The apartment had 2 bedrooms, so Emma finally had her own room instead of sleeping on a couch in the living room. Marcus had his own bedroom too, with space for a desk where he could work on reports from home when necessary. As Emma got ready for bed, she showed Marcus the first page of her new journal. In her careful handwriting, she had written, "My dad is a hero who saved a company and caught the bad guys, but most importantly, he saved me." Marcus felt tears in his eyes as he read Emma's words. He had never thought of himself as a hero. He was just a father who had tried to do the right thing. "Emma," Marcus said, sitting on her bed, "you know that you saved me too, right?" "How did I save you?" Emma asked. "You gave me a reason to be brave," Marcus explained. "Everything I did because I wanted to make sure you would be safe and healthy. You made me stronger than I ever thought I could be." Emma hugged her father tightly. "I love you, Dad." "I love you too," Marcus said, "more than all the stars in the sky." After Emma fell asleep, Marcus sat in his living room and thought about how much his life had changed. 3 months ago, he had been a struggling single father working as a night janitor, worried about paying his daughter's medical bills. Now he had a good job, a nice home, and the knowledge that Emma would grow up healthy and happy. But the most important change wasn't the money or the title or the better apartment. The most important change was that Marcus now knew he was capable of standing up for what was right, even when it was scary and dangerous. Marcus walked over to the window and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, other people were facing difficult choices between doing what was safe and doing what was right. Marcus hoped that some of them would find the courage to choose the right path, just like he had. On his kitchen table, there was a framed letter that Victoria had given him after the trial ended. It was a thank you note from the company's board of directors, praising Marcus for his integrity and bravery. But the part that meant the most to Marcus was the last line. "Heroes come from the most unexpected places, and true courage is found in ordinary people who choose to do extraordinary things." Marcus turned off the lights and checked on Emma one more time before going to bed. She was sleeping peacefully, her new journal on the nightstand beside her bed. Tomorrow she would write more stories, and Marcus would go to work protecting the company and its employees from people who might try to hurt them. As Marcus fell asleep, he thought about the old uniform hanging in Victoria's office. She had kept it as a reminder that the most important person in any company is not the CEO or the board members, but the ordinary employee who has the courage to speak up when something is wrong. Marcus Williams had started as a janitor who cleaned floors and emptied trash cans. But he had become something much more important, a man who proved that doing the right thing, no matter how scary it might be, can change everything. And in the end, that was the greatest transformation of all.